big news broke right before I went live, and it is very, very important. Ty and I and Jen were the only national reporters in Flint, Michigan on April 25th and the final week of April for the 5-year anniversary of the Flint water crisis. Let that sink in. It's been 5 years since an American city was poisoned, and 5 years since that American city is still drinking contaminated water. And there was not anyone. Nobody from NBC was there. Nobody from CNN was there. I think there was one photographer from the New York Times. Nobody. Nobody. And by the way, as Bernie Sanders has shown you, going down to Denmark, South Carolina, Jen just did a report on that we're going to post tomorrow. As he showed you, there's a lot of other Flints with water contamination for many, many years that never got any attention. So for those of you who are new to Status Quo, one thing we like to do here is cover the stories the corporate media ignores and covers up. So between the Young Turks and now Status Quo, I've been to Flint 14 times. Ty has been to Flint, I believe, 10 or 11 times. Jen has now been to Flint 3 or 4 times. The reason we keep going back is not for glamour or to make a name for ourselves. The reason we keep going back is I personally cannot think of a bigger and more important story than an American city, particularly of poor working people, majority of whom are minorities, that through nothing they did, were poisoned beginning in April 2014. And in a normal civilized society, so you look at New Zealand, who had a mass shooting, banned the guns within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they banned assault weapons. In a normal society, if there was a crisis caused by the government, you'd have the National Guard in there, you'd have the Army Corps in there, you'd have an emergency disaster declaration, and the pipes would be out, the people would have full Medicare for life, and it would no longer be a problem. But we don't live in a normal country because we don't live in a country, we live in the United Corporations of America. And remember to press that like button right under there, the thumbs up. If you're watching on your mobile phone, you have to X out of the live chat, click the thumbs up, and then you can get back in the live chat. So basically, nothing was done for the people of Flint under Republican Governor Rick Snyder. Governor Rick Snyder was the Republican governor. He was the one who appointed unelected emergency managers to run Flint. And those unelected emergency managers decided, let's switch the city of Flint from the Detroit water system to the Flint River. And, us environmental officials, we're not going to add the proper chemicals to the water supply that by law we have to add because we want to save money. So we're not going to add corrosion control treatment into the water, and as a result, the lead leached off. So if you want to give Governor Snyder and his allies and his advisors the benefit of the doubt that they didn't intend to do this, okay, well, the response, or therefore all, the lack of response, has been intentional. The last time we were in Flint, as I'm about to show you, it is a crisis and a catastrophe of epic proportions. If you need a reminder, before I get to the news, here is what Ty put together, a montage from our 5-year anniversary coverage, which you paid for and you funded us to be there.
Give me your past, give me your present, give me your night sky.
We've been tormented for 5 years. 5 years we've been tormented with dirty, nasty, unsafe, unhealthy water. The ponds are not open anymore because they say the water is fixed. But if it's fixed, tell me where it's fixed. If it's fixed, tell me who fixed it. If it's fixed, tell me when they fixed it.
It is not over. It's not a joke. It's not funny. The water is dirt.
44 years old. She died an absolutely horrible death because they lied to her about the water. Her skin was torn off of her body. Justice needed to be done for the Flint residents, and it needs to be done now.
I see dead GM workers and my sisters and my family.
I took him to McLaren. I trusted the hospital. I made the biggest mistake in my life. They said he had an unusual pneumonia. The bacteria is eating up all his red blood cells. And even when he was dying, I was trying to bathe him and scrub him in the same water that was ripping his life out.
I give you honesty and loyalty. I give you consistent.
My father, Joseph Clement, may he rest in complete power, was a victim of the water crisis. My father's body was riddled with cancer.
She had her breast removed, and then they ended up taking her stomach.
I lost my daughter's dad, who died from bacterial pneumonia August of 2015 before McLaren and the state decided that it was a Legionnaires bacteria.
My son had gotten really sick and he was on life support. They tested him for everything and they said it wasn't anything, but he was spitting out his insides and to touch his mouth, blood was just gushing out. And they said it looked like it was Legionnaires disease.
Flint water contribute to my mama. She just died in January from kidney failure and a whole bunch of things wrong with her.
It's like Russian roulette. You never know if you're gonna get Legionnaires when you touch that water, take a shower. You just don't know. And, we just want people to know not to drink that water. That water is still not safe to drink. Still, this is happening today. It's not over. It's never been over. Whoever said it's over, it's a lie. It is a flat-out lie. Still continuing. 5 years and counting.
This place ain't safe. It's not safe at all. We got a pistol in our mouth every day. It's called tap water.
I wanted to set it up. If you didn't know what was still going on in Flint, that was a month ago. That was 1 month ago. And why this is important, it doesn't really matter if you live in Flint. It doesn't really matter if you at all have water problems in your community. The whole point of continuing to cover Flint is A, what kind of country do we live in? Do we live in a country where if through nothing you did wrong, you are poisoned, you are harmed by your government who was trying to privatize the water system? Because remember, that's why the Flint water crisis happened in the first place. They were temporarily using the Flint River because they were building a privatized water pipeline that was not necessary. And oops, we poisoned the poor people there. Oops, we poisoned the majority black community. And then they've left them to fend for themselves. So why this is super important is it could happen, and it most likely will happen, in a community near you if the people who caused this to the people of Flint are not held accountable. Because what exactly happens in a country if people, whether it's the government, whether it's the corporations, whoever it is that caused the problem, get away with it? It gives a playbook to other governors, to other senators, to other congresspeople, to other city council officials to say, well, they got away with it in Flint, so let's do it here. That's what happens. So status coup last year, for those of you who follow us, and remember, press the like button right there and press the share button. Status coup did something very radical. Because we've built up sources, Jen and I knocked on almost 500 doors in Flint. And what we found out was Governor Snyder, his environmental officials were cooking and cheating. They were cooking the data in Flint. They were cheating on the water testing by going into residents' homes and flushing their water, meaning running their water lines right before taking samples in dozens of homes. And those homes were the homes that were used for the official state testing program. And these were the homes that the governor of Michigan used, the very homes that they cheated on the water testing to get false lower numbers. These were the homes that Governor Rick Snyder used to declare Flint's water restored. And this story, written by Jen, you got Alyssa Milano, who called this out. You have Susan Sarandon, who reacted to our report and called it out. You had Congressman Ro Khanna calling for an investigation. You had Congresswoman and presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard calling for an investigation. Since then, we've had Congressman Dan Kildee, who represents Flint, who has called for an investigation. So all of this, the corporate media buried this story that Jen and I broke. The corporate media, Newsweek, was about to do the story, and they killed it the day before, which I digress. I don't want to get into. So we met in February. This was under Republican Governor Rick Snyder when we broke this story. In February, we met with the new Attorney General, Dana Nessel. We didn't meet with her, but we met with officials from her office, including the Solicitor General of Michigan, who is now in charge of the Flint water investigation. The whole thing. And by the way, we broke this story because you funded us to go to Flint. Jen and I didn't have the money. We hadn't even launched Status Coup yet. And we didn't stop after we broke the story. We kept pushing. We kept trying to get lawmakers on the record. I pushed and I pushed until the Attorney General's office would meet with me. And today, I want to tell you, I have no idea if why the Attorney General has seized the governor of Michigan, Rick Snyder's phones, his iPad, his hard drive. I have no idea if it's connected to the story we broke. But what I do know is I met with Ty. We met with the AG's office in February, and it has just come out that former Governor Rick Snyder's phones, iPad, and computer hard drive has been seized via search warrants by the new Attorney General's office. Authorities investigating Flint's water crisis have used search warrants to seize from storage the state-owned mobile devices of former Governor Rick Snyder and 65 other current or former officials, the Associated Press has learned. The warrants were sought 2 weeks ago by the Attorney General's office and signed by a Flint judge, according to documents the Associated Press obtained through public records requests. Solicitor General Fadwa Hammoud, that is who I and Ty met with in February, and Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy, who is helping with the probe, confirmed they executed a series of search warrants related to the criminal investigation of Flint's lead-contaminated water in 2014 and 15 and an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. They declined further comment. One warrant, signed May 19th, lists all content from Snyder's cell phone, iPad, and computer hard drive. Similar information was sought from the device of 33 employees who worked in his office, 11 in the Department of Environmental Quality, and 22 in the Department of Health and Human Services. The evidence was apparently initially obtained by former Special Prosecutor Todd Flood with investigative subpoenas. Because it has been kept in a division of the Attorney General's office, Hammoud took the unusual step of securing a warrant to search another part of the office. She has been managing the probe since January. We're doing everything we can to comply, said Dan Olson, a spokesman for Attorney General Dana Nessel, who is not involved in the criminal investigation and is instead handling lawsuits against the state by residents. A similar warrant was issued to the Department of Technology, Management, and Budget. Quote, the department is complying with the warrant. We cannot discuss the details further because it is part of pending litigation. The warrants seek data from the devices of individuals who have been charged in the probe, but also uncharged officials such as Snyder, former Environmental Quality Director Dan Wyant, and various people who worked in Snyder's office, including Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, top aide Richard Baird, and Chief of Staff Dick Posthumus. Ooh, imagine having that name your whole life. Lawyers who have represented Snyder and his office could not immediately be reached for comment on Monday. The warrants came after Hammoud this year reported that boxes of records were discovered in the basement of a state building, including phone extractions and a trove of other materials stored on hard drives that allegedly had not been turned over in response to the subpoenas. She sought long breaks in the criminal cases to look at the boxes and any other evidence, but judges declined to suspend the case for 6 months. Folks, this is a major story, and you're not going to see it covered on CNN or on MSNBC. About April 2016, I believe I have the month right, I developed a source in Flint who, I can't get into so many details, but was attached to the water crisis investigation. This source told me that all of the prosecutors from the state, meaning all of the prosecutors that were involved in the criminal case that were charging state officials, 15 officials have been tied so far. 15 officials have been charged related to the Flint water crisis. All of them told me every single prosecutor on that team thought that they had enough evidence to charge then Governor Rick Snyder with a crime. Everyone differed on which crime they could charge him with. Some thought manslaughter. Some thought criminal negligence. But all of them felt there was enough evidence to charge him with something. This similar, like when you think of the Russia investigation, Robert Mueller was a special prosecutor. So technically, he was supposed to be separate from the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office was not supposed to be influencing Robert Mueller's investigation. So when you think about that dynamic, that was what it was supposed to be in Flint. The Attorney General of Michigan at the time was Republican Bill Schuette. He was a Republican who was also running for governor last year. So there was a special prosecutor in the Flint water crisis case with a team of other prosecutors with him, very similar to Robert Mueller's investigation, and they were supposed to be separate from the Attorney General's office, and they were supposed to be able to charge as they saw fit without having to get the permission from the Attorney General. I am told, and I was told then, that all of the prosecutors on that case thought they had enough evidence to charge Governor Snyder. But the then Attorney General, Bill Schuette, who was also running for governor as a Republican, would not allow them to charge Rick Snyder, which kind of makes sense if you're a corrupt, scummy, trying not to demonetize myself. The Attorney General was Republican. He was running for governor. If he allowed charges to go forward against Rick Snyder, you think he would get any campaign money from corporations and Snyder's the foundations that give money to Snyder, the oil companies that give money to Snyder, the banks that gave money to Snyder, all of the corporate usual suspects who give money to Snyder? Hell no. So although they felt they had enough evidence, Rick Snyder was never charged. Well, as I say nationally, I take on the Democratic Party as much as the Republican Party. However, if the Democratic Party does something that deserves credit, or if Democratic officials do something that deserves credit, I will give it to them, and so should you. So this is a case, at least on a state level, of when the Republican governor is gone, and when the Republican Attorney General is gone, and there is a Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and a Democratic Attorney General, Dana Nessel, this is an example of when voting Democrat actually could make a difference. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. I'm not a vote blue no matter who. But in the case of Michigan, this was the reason that they are seizing Rick Snyder's cell phone, his iPad, his computer hard drives. Let that sink in. That's a major beeping deal. The fact that search warrants, seizing his phones, his iPad, his hard drive, they are not, let me make something very clear to you. The Attorney General of Michigan and her team is not seizing the former governor's phone, iPad, and computer hard drive if they don't have concrete reason to. If they're not looking specifically for something. You don't take that step unless you have some type of concrete evidence that there is a possible crime to charge former Governor Rick Snyder with. You just don't go to that length. It's a very risky move, and if you don't have anything substantial, then it could really basically have huge setbacks, both politically and legally, to do that. So why this is so important? In America, we have pretty much three different legal systems. We have a legal system for rich white people. Sometimes wealthy black people are in there, but usually it's just rich white people. The second legal system is one for working class, lower class white people. And the third legal system is for black people, brown people, Native Americans. So there really is 3 legal systems. And in that first legal system, I mean, 1 in 10 times does somebody in our government, in corporate America, at the foundation level, who is corrupt, who does wrong, who breaks the law, who poisons people, who harms people, who screws people. When do you ever hear a case of those people being held accountable? You don't. And when they are held accountable, it's a 6-month jail sentence. You get out for good behavior after 3 months, and that's all she wrote. This is why I have stayed on the Flint water crisis, because it's not just about the people of Flint. It's not just about the water. It's about if you don't hold government officials accountable, if there's no ramifications, if there's no criminal penalty for not only poisoning people, but then leaving them to die after, why wouldn't every government official do it to save a buck? We know most of our government officials are complete sociopaths.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.